Book TV recently visited Capitol Hill to ask members of Congress what they're reading this summer.
Congressman Fred Upton from Michigan, what are you reading this summer?
So I just finished Into the Wild, literally last week. But this is a great sort of survivalist book. It's about a young man whose family life went off the deep end for sure. Tried to get he's a very well-read, smart guy, graduated with honors from Emory University, and then he just disappeared. And obviously heartbroken family because of it, but it was, talks about his struggle, and obviously he couldn't be interviewed for it, so they went through the journal and talked to people who he had made a positive impact on as he hitchhiked across the country and tried to survive, and ultimately died in Alaska in the wilderness of starvation.
And I see you have Lights Out?
Well, this is a book that was recommended to me, Lights Out by Ted Koppel. Of course, we all know who Ted Koppel is. And he wrote a book as to how vulnerable our electric grid really might be. It's a pretty quick read. Takes only a couple hours, but it'll scare the willies out of you. And one of the things that he talks about is, what can we do to protect our grid? And of course, for me, chairman of the Energy Subcommittee, that's very important as we look at bipartisan legislation to protect the grid, both from physical as well as cyber attack. He lays out a number of things of what we ought to be able to do, make sure that we have generators that are redundant, what happens. And of course, we've seen some of these issues, particularly when we had Katrina and some of these big storms that have come through where you've got power that's knocked out sometimes for weeks. We just had a big storm in Michigan where we still have tens of thousands of people, a couple days later that are without power. But what happens if it's the whole country or a region or, a terrorist strikes? So what are the safeguards that we can try to put into place? And he spells it out. It scares the willies out of you. But to me, it's a signal that we got to do everything that we can, that particularly our states and our utilities have the proper tools in the toolbox.
And you mentioned you were reading River of Doubt.
Well, I finished that. That's actually one of my favorite books. I read that a couple years ago by Candace Millard, I believe is the author. She does a wonderful, Teddy Roosevelt, of course, is a hero in everyone's books. When you think about all of the great things that he did as president, the wilderness things, what he did. But after he left the presidency, he led an expedition through South America that took his son with him, almost died, got malaria, could have been killed, suicide. I mean, it is a page-gripping book. And so I've shared it, actually. There's a bunch of us that read a lot. For me, I'm on a plane a couple hours every week, more than a couple hours back and forth to Michigan. So I often take reading material in addition to what my staff gives me to get prepared for the weekend and, the following week. But that book, I wanted to just sit in a nice chair and read it slowly in terms of, the whole journal of his time, and great American. But as I talked to some of my colleagues that are, I wouldn't say a formal reading group for sure, but when we read a good book, we talk about it. I got it as a gift. And it was interesting the other night. I was in a dinner meeting with the Majority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, and others, and Teddy Roosevelt came up. We actually had the Library of Congress bring over some documents from after he was president, and some of us had read that book, and others will be reading it soon because it got such a good recommendation.
Are there any other books that you would recommend to your colleagues?
Well, though, that's I like history books. I like the real thing. Of course, every now and then you pick up a Grisham book, and that's a pretty quick read, and keeps you in line for all right, I'm going to finally do something fun that maybe isn't as serious as those things. But I love to browse at bookstores. Kindle, my wife's got 20, 30 books on hers. She's always trying to offer me some of the things that she's reading. But it's a good pastime. It's important. I was always a good reader, and you learn a lot. You really do.
Congressman Fred Upton, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Book TV wants to know what you're reading. Send us your summer reading list via Twitter @BookTV or Instagram @book_TV, or post it to our Facebook page, facebook.com/BookTV. Book TV on C-SPAN 2. television for serious readers.